Exit 12 is not affiliated with any 12-step group or outside organizations. The purpose of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. No person or organization is receiving any monetary gain from the recording, production, or distribution of this podcast. All hosts and guests are participating of their own free will and are only sharing their own personal experiences. Subjects discussed in this podcast may be triggering for some individuals. Listeners' discretion advised. All right. Welcome to Exit 12. My name is Brian Fields, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Michelle and Isaac.
What up?
What up? If you are, yep. It is that kind of day, folks. I'm going to need to do an inventory at the end of this day. That's how we're rolling. But if you are a youth between the ages of 14 and 26, and you are in need of behavioral health services, please come down to my house, 300 North Willow Street, Monday through Friday. Lots of people here ready to help you. Today, we have another super awesome guest. Our guest list is rocking.
I didn't even think we were going to have a guest today.
Yeah.
And then this guest is so awesome.
Way to say yes.
Michelle Parker said, hey, we're recording a podcast in 15 minutes.
I feel like it's God's doing, you know. he kind of just places people in your lap. So.
Yeah.
Absolutely, God's will.
Yeah, Valerie, welcome.
Woo!
Valerie!
Hey, guys.
Yeah, thanks for being here. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right, so we have admitted
we have a problem.
we have a problem.
Mhm.
Admitted we have a problem.
Oh, yeah.
We
Absolutely.
have came to believe that something greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity
Because we're crazy.
Absolutely.
because we're crazy.
Insane.
Mm-hmm.
And we have made a decision to turn our will and our lives over.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are at step 4.
The best step, the most fun step is what I hear.
The action step.
That action step.
Jumping into action.
By that action, boss.
So this step is the whole reason that this podcast exists.
Yes.
Because you and
we
Michelle
have
Parker.
to be careful
Okay.
because we don't want to give away step 5.
Oh,
You know?
okay. The reason why this podcast exists is because you and Michelle Parker were talking about the 12 steps, and I knew nothing about the 12 steps.
Yeah.
And I think it was you that went, get ready to bleep this. Step 12, or step 4 is and I went, what? Because my understanding was just it was this thing that you did and everyone loves this thing and you're working the steps and so why is this step bull crap?
This is
Brian.
Because this is where the rubber meets the road. Right?
Oh,
Absolutely.
This is where like you've made some progress, you've done some stuff, but this is where you have to determine like how dedicated am I to this recovery thing and how much am I willing to do? How honest am I really willing to be? And it's a step that like trips a lot of people up, and it's unfortunate because it is not that hard.
Yeah.
Right.
I think we just get into our
We
heads.
get into our heads. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm my own worst critic.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
yeah, for sure.
it seems so hard though.
We make it
I'm
so
looking
hard.
at it, and Michelle Parker had me download the app.
Yeah.
And I'm
Right.
looking at this step kind of at a glance. I don't like this step, Brian. I don't want to do this step. I would not consider myself a person in recovery. Guess what? I still don't want to do this step. This step seems really scary.
Yeah.
So let's help it be not scary.
So for those of you that don't know, step 4 is we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves, right? And so the first question we have today is, what was your impression when beginning this step?
Man, so like when I started this step, I was definitely in fear. Like I did not want to have to look at myself and like look at the hard things and look at where my faults were. I did not want to look at my part of the situation. So like I have a little like analogy that I heard in the meeting the other day. I don't know if we're allowed to talk about that, but like I heard it in the meeting, and someone says that there's four frogs sitting in a log, right? And
we just talked about this last podcast.
yeah. So like 4 frogs like sitting on a log, right? And that fourth frog jumped in, and I did not want to jump in. I wanted to sit on the log where I was happy, where I could understand, where I was comfortable, right? And so like jumping into action, I feel like in my experience, like I tried to dip my toes in and it did not work for me. Like I could not like come to terms with my character defects, right? So like my character defects, like one of my biggest ones is anger. Like I feel really big emotions. I have a lot of reactivity, and like looking at that made me like shy away, and made me get angry about it, like, honestly. Yeah. And, being angry is something that a lot of us struggle with, in recovery and out of recovery, people that don't consider themselves in recovery. And it just definitely, I think this step made me come to terms with the things that I really needed to change about myself in order to further with my recovery, in order to further my spiritual growth and have spiritual fitness for myself.
Yeah, that's awesome. What about you, Michelle?
My first impression of it, I was like, man, like I did treatment and I did all this work, and I figured out some of my character defects, and so like I feel like I don't have to do step 4. And so like I was like, 'cause I already did the work, and so like in my mind, my alcoholic brain, I'm like, I already did it. So but like Valerie was saying, it really was like taking a look in the mirror at myself, who I really was, and how I acted, and my ego and my character defects and all the things, and actually holding myself accountable for those things. And that was like my first impression.
Yeah. Mine is different from probably everybody. I didn't care.
Dope.
Yeah. And that's not like I'm big tough man, I'm making inventory. Wasn't anything like that. It was like at this point in my recovery, I was doing this in the ranch, so I was about 4 months, 4 months clean, I guess. No, it'd be like 5 months clean. And so I was still like flirting with this idea of like, really, what do I want to be in recovery or not? Mm-hmm. And like, if I'm being honest, when I went through my first set of steps, I didn't put a lot. I put a lot into it, but none of it was really genuine, Mm-hmm. And really like all of the steps while I was in Nugent's Ranch, it's just me being honest, is like, this is just another step that I have to do to get out of Nugent's Ranch. And that's what I wanted.
Checking boxes.
Yeah. And that's all I was doing. And so like my first impression of the step was like, okay, cool. I got to write some more stuff.
Right.
Got it, boss.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I can do this.
Yeah. Sure. Let's do that. You know what I mean? As I transitioned out and really like tried to work recovery, my impression of the step was different again when I got to it, because it was more of like I was serious about recovery at that point, right? When I got out of the ranch and I decided to change my sponsor because I hadn't been honest with my original sponsor, and I picked him because I knew he would sign my papers. It was more of like I was ready to do it out of fear that I was going to relapse, and that everything that I wanted and what I felt like was so close would go away.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, let's do it. Let's get it done. So for you guys, like, what makes this step like so daunting and difficult?
I think it made like super difficult for me. So like when I did my first 4-step, I don't know if we could talk about this, but like I almost relapsed. Like the 4-step almost sent me into relapse due to the fact like I thought so small of myself. My self-worth definitely was depleted. I didn't want to take accountability, I didn't want to take accountability for my actions and for my anger and for the things that I have done to other people, that manipulative behaviors, but even like the good ones, like being stubborn, like there is good character defects, but you just have to know how to control them. And that's what I believe, you know, and, you know, being stubborn for me, like it's good and bad. It's a double-edged sword, when to use it, when to be stubborn. And then like another character defect that I have that I feel comfortable sharing is, I have a really big savior complex. And so like, after I did that, I kind of looked at my, the relationship that I was in, because not only does it look at yourself, but like it looks at all aspects of your life, you know, that this inventory, you know, you look at your relationship, you look at your friendships, you look at your acquaintances. But I looked at my relationship and I was like, man, like I am just trying to save this person that's not ready to be saved. And taking accountability for that. Like now, what is the action that I'm going to correct that, right? And so like it was just super difficult, like looking at every aspect of my life of where my character defects and where they were constantly working when there wasn't any positivity working. It was a lot of negative, right? And getting past that is what I really needed. And then after that, like one I really wanted to share on this podcast, and I was talking to Michelle before this, is that I just worked a 4-step on my mom. You know, my mom had given me up to foster care, and she'd signed over her rights. Well, I just did, you know, the next few steps. After this, I don't want to give it away, but when I did that 4-step on my mom, like I looked at my part and I found a lot that I did, you know, it's not just her. Right. And so like now I feel so much relief after working the next few steps. I felt so much relief, and I have a relationship today, and I have, you know, she gets to talk to my son, and, you know, now this step has driven me to, be a better mother, a better friend, a better acquaintance, a better person in recovery. But I think that's why it's difficult. Sorry.
Yeah, that's what makes this so interesting to me as a normie coming in and looking at it. A lot of the questions that I had around the 12 steps, like start with this step, because something that I've learned and seen without talking about anyone's story, when talking with people or listening to people talk about the recovery journey and working the steps, is that it is that challenging, daunting thing at first. And then this step is something that I hear so many people going back to, and them growing and learning and healing through working this step and returning to this step. And the other thing that's really cool about it, I think, is that all joking aside, it is something that I think anyone can do, whether you're a person with lived experience or in recovery or not.
Absolutely.
This is something that can be implemented and useful for anyone, no matter their walk of life.
Yeah. I think what was daunting and difficult for me was, you know, like I had resentments towards others too. And then like I've done things to other people too, but like there was some things that were done to me, and in the step it you know talks about your character defects, and then it asks you like what was your part in it. And so like if something
spoiler alert
if something was like done to me and I you know really had to see where my part was in it, even though in my mind I didn't think that I had a part in it, but then really there was a part in it, and I had to face that, you know. And like it really had to pull those dark sides that I didn't want to reveal.
I think really like for me and what I've come to observe and witness and can relate with is as recovering addicts and alcoholics or whatever it is that you're dealing with, we like to make mountains out of molehills, right?
Absolutely.
And
that's 100% me.
We like to be ourselves, right? And so when it comes to this step, right, we're not asking you to go and sit down with the district attorney and say, "Hey, dog, check this out." In 2007, you know what I mean? Like, nobody's saying that, right? We're asking you to take a piece of paper and a pencil and write down some names. You know what I mean? And so like I think a lot of times we get in our own way and make this into something that it doesn't need to be. Like, obviously, it's always hard for anybody to look at themselves in the mirror, especially after a long road of addiction and all those things and the things that you've done wrong. But like the thing that you need to remind yourself if you're approaching this step is you're not doing this alone anymore, right? This isn't your will anymore, right? You have given your will to a power greater than yourself in the step prior, and you need to trust that. You know what I mean? And need to trust that that is what is going to get me through this part. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of people forget about those previous steps coming and using those and like leaning on those to get you through step 4. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And can I return to a point that Michelle just made really quick?
Yeah.
Because it reminds me of one of I think my favorite book I read this year was Extreme Ownership. And Kurt and I did a whole podcast about it, but it's that same exact mentality of how would my actions change? How would my outlook change if I looked at every single situation and I said, what could I have done differently in this situation? It doesn't mean that everything is all of a sudden my fault, because there are stuff that you can't control. But when you see those events that you can't control, or you're interacting with another person, what could I have done differently, or what did I do in that situation that led us to X, Y, and Z? And there's a freedom that comes with that, because once you, and this is, some top of the pyramid type of stuff, but once you hit that point of self-actualization, I think it is truly provides a sense of freedom. And that's something else that I think I've heard a lot of people echo kind of in this journey of learning about the 12 steps.
Yeah. Like how it was explained to me, like this guy was sitting outside of a meeting and he was like, I want you to imagine that I have a backpack on, right? And there's these like little rocks on the ground, and he grabbed them and he's like, so I want you to imagine that this one here is a little bit like a pain. This is some resentment. This is some anger. This is some lust. This is some greed, right? And I'm going to just throw these in my backpack and not deal with them, right? And then I'm going to keep going around like through life and picking up these pebbles, right? I'm going to keep encountering these situations that make me pick up these pebbles, and I'm going to throw them in my backpack. Well, eventually, like that backpack gets too heavy to carry. Like they might be small pebbles, right? But eventually they accumulate, and this steps allows you to take that backpack off. And like what you're saying, like the freedom from that is absolutely, I mean, it's amazing. It truly is. So
I think it was something that I realized, I think early learning about steps. I started thinking about step 4 as holding onto a rope, and like the resentments and character defects and everything that you hold on to. It's kind of like that analogy where you're carrying all that weight, but like with the rope, you're holding it and you're getting rug burn on your hand. And that's how I viewed it.
Yeah. And so it's a great way to look at it. So, they have all those sayings like, how free do you want to be? Like all that different type of stuff. And it may be cliche, and those analogies may be cliche a little bit, but they're absolutely true, and as people in general, like we are not meant to just carry around baggage. Right. And I think, reminding yourself that like, once you like, I can't explain to you, like when we do like a priority list of like my values, like family and peace are my 2 top values. You know what I mean? And so like when you experience true peace after complete chaos, you know what I mean? Like you'll do everything you can to protect that, and writing some stuff down on some paper is not the end of the world to get that done. How does this step prepare you for the steps moving forward?
Without spoilers?
Without spoilers, yeah.
That's what I was just thinking about.
I mean, we kind of gotten into it a little bit. We should have really done like step 4 and 5 together.
Right.
I think it's more fun to keep everyone waiting another 2 weeks.
Yeah, tune in for the next one.
Yeah.
What it is. Man, so I guess like, how does this prepare you for the steps for moving forward? So for me, like noticing those character defects, and I kind of like already like with my mom, you know, like the next steps moving forward, is really just like I feel like being willing. I feel like it's a lot about being willing, being honest, being rigorously honest is like super important in this step, because like if you leave anything out, well, if I left anything out, I'm going to rephrase that. If I had left anything out of this step, like it wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have given me the same relief. It wouldn't have given me the same spiritual experience that I had. Like I almost relapsed, but then like after doing the step and then after doing the next step, right after this, step number 5, the ominous thing, I just had so much relief, and I just like had so much like joy and like excitement, and like even though it was super difficult and it was super daunting and it was just like kind of like emotionally draining, that relief comes on in the next step. And I think that it prepared me to know what I was looking at and knowing what I have to face in order to stay clean, you know, and that's kind of like where it is my experience, is that if I do not do this, like I could be getting, you know, high or drunk the next day, you know, and that's where I don't want to be.
Well, and you can't, it's kind of sounds like you can't move forward. You can't drive down the road without knowing where you're supposed to be going.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I think I agree with that. You know, before I asked my sponsor to be my sponsor, she gave me a ride home one day, and she asked me about my steps. She's like, "How are you doing on your steps? Where are you at?" And I was like, "You know, I'm stuck on step 3." And she called me out right away. This is why I asked her to be my sponsor. She's like, "You know, you're not stuck. You're unwilling." And I was like,
Yeah. My sister said that.
Yeah, I was like, oh.
Acceptance.
Like, dang. And so I got to this point with the sponsor I had, and I was like, you know, I don't think this is working out with this sponsor, because I need someone who could call me out on my BS, you know, because it really need that accountability with someone who's not afraid to be like, actually, no, you're selfish, self-centered.
Selfish and self-seeking. My sponsor does the same thing.
Yeah. Okay. What would you guys want to tell somebody that is maybe approaching this step and having reservations?
I guess that I would just say, like, it kind of goes back to the same thing. Like, being rigorously honest is what really helped me through this step. And I would just tell them, like, life on life's terms, like, leave it in the past. Like, this is this step to leave it in the past. This is the step to start practicing a more deeper understanding of self, you know, and being more self-aware, and, you know, kind of like what Brian said, you know, like we, as anybody, as human beings, we like to make mountains out of molehills, especially alcoholics and addicts, or however you choose to identify. We like to make things more complicated. And it is an emotional thing, you know, it is an emotional toll. And I just encourage people to make sure you have the right person to do the next set of steps with. Make sure you have the right person to share this with. I've had a couple different sponsors, and, you know, just gaining trust through the first 3 steps is just super important. And that's really what I would tell somebody is just don't quit before the miracle. Yeah. Really.
No, I agree, because, you know, a lot of people have reservations for this step. And I think, you know, like we were talking about earlier, like we make it more complicated than it really is. And so, like, when we actually do it, like when I actually did the 4th step, I was just like, oh, this actually was a piece of cake. It really wasn't that hard. And, you know, it's like something, like I said early, a couple podcasts back, right? Like, what do you got to lose? You know? And why are you holding on to it? And so.
Yeah, there's freedom and uncomfortability, right? And at the end of the day, it's exactly that. That would be what I would just echo, is, you know, and what was echoed to me repeatedly And even after years of sobriety, of, you know, when I'm getting these suggestions, and I'm like, that sounds stupid.
I don't want to do that.
Yeah. What do you mean, dude? You want me to? I'm a grown man. You are a grown man. You want to get on our knees and hold hands and pray?
What do you mean? It was actually a lot difficult for women too.
So, yeah, man. I mean, just you don't really have anything to lose. If you're at this point in your life where you're in a program like this and you're going through these steps,
Even if you're not in the program,
even if
you
you're
know?
not, you know, but if you're at some crossroad in your life, you'd really, you know, when I came to the rooms, I was battered, broken, and had nothing. You know, I had a trash bag full of clothes that were ripped and tattered and all the things. And,
Bitter ends.
Yeah.
Bitter ends.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, that is all the time that we have for today. Thank you again, Valerie, so much for joining us.
Last minute. And she was saying, I wanted to add this really quick because she was telling Michelle Parker and I, oh man, I wish that I had had time to dress up for this. If I knew I was going to record today, but her
she was
shirt is
ready to
literally says normalized
Yeah.
recovery, which is exactly what we're trying to do here. So I would say that she
Break the
came,
stigma.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
came dressed up exactly how she was supposed to.
Absolutely.
God's plans are better than mine.
For sure. All right. We'll see you guys next time for Step 5.